Hello, everyone. Today's episode might be a little bit more emotional than usual. And I know we just covered fertility with Caroline Lunny, but it's my turn to talk about fertility. So we're doing another episode. And I know we noticed it. The last episode got a lot of attention, and it doesn't totally surprise me because I think maybe that fertility is something that isn't talked about very much, or at least not enough, and it's something that a lot of us struggle with. And it's something that I'm getting increasingly angry that we don't even know how to talk about it because we don't know what questions to ask, and we don't know what kind of issues there are. And so Kibby talked a little bit about her fertility journey, the last one, and now I've got one. So, we can kind of both talk about our own perspectives.
And then we could also we'll talk a little bit more this time about the egg freezing process, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going through it right now. And I know that we talked about infertility in general, but I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, what is it like to dive in? I have my own experiences. So for people, I've been hearing that more and more. People are interested in egg freezing. Even if they don't have fertility issues, people are wondering about our different options. Egg freezing is one of the next frontiers of women taking charge of their own lives and fertility, right? We had birth control as, a major shift in women's choice, and now we have egg freezing. So, but what is it, right? What would you have to do? What is it like? Those are all set of questions that people are probably asking themselves before they, do it themselves. So,
absolutely. And we include a giant disclaimer at the end of this talking about like how we're not your doctors, we're not your therapists, and so take what we say with a grain of salt. And with this, truly, we are not fertility experts here. So a lot of this information might be a bit distorted. I'm still confused about my own situation in some ways. So this is really more to just tell you what we think we know and maybe help you develop your own questions so that you can ask your own providers. So what happened was this all started with Caroline doing the modern fertility test, finding out about her own fertility issues, and then getting care from a woman named Dr. Amy, who she just glows about. And I decided, given my career path and how important kids are to me and how I just don't know when the right time to have a kid is, that I should freeze my eggs, and basically secure my fertility. So I did a modern fertility and I got an AMH level, and AMH is a hormone that kind of corresponds to how many eggs you have. So it's really important. I got an AMH level of 4.79, which is high. So I was expecting to come to California for my egg freezing and have 25 to 30 follicles to harvest. Follicle is like an egg house. Kibby, is that maybe
yeah, it's a little lower, exactly. If I understand, we're not biological doctors at all. So they were like egg sacs that basically each one of them would grow an egg and release it into the fallopian tube. So
yeah, so I was expecting to have a whole bunch. Caroline said that when her sister got it done, it looked like a garlic bulb cut in half. That's how many, how fertile she was. And so I was like, okay, out of that, I'll get 20 mature eggs, let's say. And then that gives me a 90% chance of IVF working for one kid and 66% chance of having two kids through IVF. Plus just being naturally fertile with that high of an AMH. I'm like, I'm probably never going to even need these eggs. But if I do, that's for late 30s. So I sat down in that ultrasound chair feeling pretty good. I'm like, this is going to be one and done. I'm a fertility goddess, just like my mom and sister, all's good. So easy. And what happened was Dr. Amy looked first at my right ovary and she starts counting. She's like, all right, I see them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm like, what about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? What? She's like, all right, we got, beautiful ovary over here, 6 follicles. And I'm just sitting that's so low. That doesn't make, but all right, let's go left ovary. And then she goes over to the left ovary, and Caroline's in the room with me because I'm comfortable sharing everything with Caroline. And she goes over to the left ovary and she says, Caroline, can you please step out? And she turns to me and she says, it looks like you have severe endometriosis on your left ovary, which had essentially overtaken the entire ovary and there were no follicles. So I went from thinking I'd have like 25 follicles to having 6, and to now knowing that I have a fertility-threatening condition, the one that is known, I mean, and I don't know how far this has reached. I don't know if it's hit the fallopian tubes. She said my uterus looked good, so that's good. But, endometriosis can apparently, through my Googling, increase likelihood of miscarriage, of infertility. It can decrease egg quality. And so I go from thinking I'm young, I've got these beautiful eggs, I'm in good shape, to being like, I have 6 eggs, I don't know their quality. Although they were on an ovary that wasn't affected, so I'm hoping they're good quality. And just being like, what am I doing? Like freezing my eggs. If you need 20 to have a 90% chance of one kid, well, what am I going to get with 6? And not like this is a cheap procedure,
Right.
And
so your mind is going through all the different, like, switching the expectation of the plan, right? Like, oh, I'm going to have X amount, and now I'm going to have this amount. Like, what were you feeling in that moment when she gives you that news?
Well, I just instantly, like, tears just started instantly streaming down my face. Mm-hmm. The 6 already was freaking me out from the first ovary. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't what I was expecting. And then to hear the second one was wiped out. And it's not like I have any pain. I mean, endometriosis, I'd only heard of it in women with extreme pain, like pelvic pain. So I was like, none of this makes any sense. This is a stupid thing to say, but I think I had kind of gotten it into my mind and identity that, like, the Trumbull women don't struggle with fertility. I was like, this is like a specialty of ours. My mom had 4 kids. She had me at 40. My sister had her 2 kids in her late 30s, just like didn't struggle to get pregnant. And I was just like, when I got that AMH of 4.79, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's our thing. We're highly fertile. And the whole thing about feeling like more of a woman with that, I think that was a little bit true. Yeah. At the very least, I felt younger. It was like, I've got all this time.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fertile forever. I just feel young, like healthy. And then to hear that it's 6, it was like, that just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't compute. And then the endometriosis just came out of absolute nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a topic that I think we discussed a little bit in the last episode on infertility, but the identity piece, right? And the attaching womanhood to fertility, which is, of course, like, such a direct association. But I don't know, how did you feel getting that infertility? I mean, what were the thoughts that going on through your mind in terms of, we thought we were fertile women, and then hearing that we have issues? Like, what did it do to that identity, the way we saw ourselves? And
it's not been horrible. Like, it just made me feel instantly older. I mean, I have so much to be grateful for in this situation. I'll go into that later. But I mean, truly, like, I'm here with Caroline, and Caroline is like one of the things I have to be grateful for. She's like a big one. But when I just compare, I have my baby daddy, and so one of the things I was thinking is, like, I can't imagine going out into the dating pool with this. And I know that you struggled with that. Mm-hmm. Although you have eggs. It's just mystery.
Yeah. And once you get into this world of infertility stuff or fertility stuff, it's easy to want to be like, well, I have this, but I don't have that, like kind of compare the different pieces, right? I have eggs, or I have a good uterus, or, but it's all the kind of the same thing of a shattered illusion of just like, oh, you just get married, have a glass of wine, have a lovely night with your husband or partner, and have those babies, right? It's just like, we spend so much of our lives planning for the career and how we're going to balance and building on ourselves that I mean, for me, I just took this as a given. And then the same thing as you felt, like, I'm healthy. I've never had any major issues with, any of my reproductive system. And so I just took it for granted. And in that moment where I got the news, like, you might have to do IVF, I panicked. I just lost it. I That's why I was asking you how you felt, because I felt so numb in that moment. Then I was so angry driving home. I was so angry.
I was just like, how the fuck am I going to afford this?
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not, I mean, I'm a fucking grad student, you know, and, you know, Paul, we're not married yet. Like, and I have to do this now. And like, he's been working very long. So it was just like the financial burden was just horrifying, truly horrifying. And yeah, I mean, I did kind of, I think there was a slight shift to feeling older, slightly less feminine. It was, and I could deal with it, you know, like, it's not that much of a, whatever, like, I can deal with that part. But it helped being like, I already have my partner, and I know he's not going to be put off by this or freaked out or anything like that. Like, I know he's not going to leave or anything like that. And so those kinds of concerns didn't have to hit as much, but it was a little bit like, I mean, I told my mom and sister right away, but it was like, fuck, like, I thought this was something we shared, and like, that part's so, I can't say it without kind of laughing at myself because it's so stupid, but, I don't know. Yeah.
In the spirit of thinking about how loved ones factor in, you know, you're talking about your mom and your sister and talking to them about it. What was, and talking to Paul about it, your partner, what was that like, having all those conversations? Like, were they helpful? Were they not? Did you feel a distance or connection to them? What was it like for you?
Yeah, that went well, actually. So my mom is in Europe right now visiting my brother. And the only reason I say that is because I couldn't get a hold of her for the entire day. And that, at one point I had a wave of anger, and it wasn't just like anger at the situation. I was angry at the entire world and everybody in it.
Yep.
And so I was angry at my mom for not picking up the phone, but the reality is that she didn't have a phone to pick up. Like, she's not in the, like, you know, she didn't have data. But I talked to Paul first, and I was actually in the office with Dr. Amy and Caroline, and this was actually just kind of amusing to me because I was like, hey, Paul, like, so first, before I get to that, I'll tell you what the result was. Dr. Amy thinks I need to freeze my eggs 3 times. And essentially, I think that's to get up to close to that 20 number. Of course, the problem is, like, I don't know that all these 6 follicles are going to be mature, so I'm worried it's going to be more like 12. Because sometimes when you harvest these follicles, right, they've got eggs in them, but some of these eggs aren't going to be ready. And so it's like you can't just freeze these eggs that are not going to produce anything. So she thinks I need to freeze my eggs 3 times, and that's basically for babies 2 and 3. And then hopefully I can have the first one naturally. But she thinks I need to get on that pretty much ASAP after the freezing is done and the endometriosis surgery is done, because my egg count's still not that high, and if I'm working with one ovary, like, I don't know if the other ovary's going to come back. It might. But, you know, it's all scarred and fucked up. So the endometriosis could come back. Who knows where that will come back. Egg count's going to drop the whole time. And so it's like there's no time like the present. So that really brought up my timeline from getting pregnant in 3 years or, you know, 2 years trying, and then to, like, in 3 months trying to get pregnant. 3, 4, or 5 months. So I was basically, like, texting Paul of, hi, Daddy, you got to get me pregnant.
Yeah. How did that go?
Congratulations. Well, you know, the sweet thing is that Paul admitted that he's having trouble emotionally matching me here because he's so excited to try to get pregnant that he's like, for him, this is just news that we get to try sooner, because I was, like, holding him off. Like, no, I want a few more years, and he wants to get pregnant yesterday, so he's sweet about it. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
What about talking to your mom and sister? I know, especially now I'm hearing, like, I thought I was one of them. I thought that I was like the fertility goddess like them, and now this is different. What was it like to talk to them about it?
They were good. You know, my sister's a doctor, and so she, in motherhood was rough for her. It wasn't an easy one. So she has a good sense of humor about it, and she worked on an OB floor for a very long time doing anesthesia. And so, you know, she was like, I've seen this. I'm not alarmed I was kind of like, I don't really get why you're not alarmed, but fine. She's like, you've got one good ovary, you know, it's going to work out. You're going to freeze these eggs. So she was just taking the more kind of reassuring / are you sure you want 3 kids kind of angle. And then she talked to Dr. Amy, and what Nikki did that I really appreciated was she's like, I trust your doctor. She's really well educated. She explained everything. It all made sense to me based on what I've seen. And I think you're in really good hands and you've got a really good plan. Mm-hmm. And so having my sister say that was really helpful. I talked to my mom later when it was like at 7 a.m. She was just waking up. And the fear I had with my mom was that she was going to lose it because she's more, she's just really anxious about it. She's been talking about making sure my fertility is safe for a really long time. And I just think she didn't know the steps I needed to take to ensure my fertility because she went to med school like, 50 years ago or whatever. And she was really calm and she just kept it together, and she just like wanted to talk to my doctor too. And she didn't freak me out about it, which was good. It was kind of what I needed. And then the next day when I then woke up, because we're like 10 hours apart time wise, she was like, I got really reassuring text from your doctor. I'm feeling much better about this. Like, I think it's going to be okay. So I think they reacted well. I didn't bring up the stupid fertility goddess identity shit. My sister would probably laugh that off, but
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's great that they were supportive. I know this has been really hard for you, and you and I have been texting, when you got the news, and I wanted to ask you, this is the first time that actually, for listeners, and this is the first time I'm actually talking to Jacqueline one-on-one about this, and I want to know what's been the hardest part for you.
I think one has been people doubting it, doubting the plan, doubting my doctor, which just, when something like this happens, I think what helps is to trust your doctor and trust that you have got a stable plan in place and you know what you're doing, and people have a lot of opinions. And
what are you feeling right now as you're talking about this?
I don't know. I wish I just didn't feel so flat.
Mm-hmm. You're feeling flat. What is that like?
It's just a weird situation to be in a hotel room in California and like all of a sudden I'm supposed to get pregnant in 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then when people doubt that or even tell me to get second opinions, which I can do, but it's like, please just like, I don't want advice right now. Mm-hmm. I don't want doubt right now. It takes away the things that have been making it easy to cope with this. And and I think with the work thing, like, people at work being like, or me anticipating them being like, why are you getting this done in California? You have patients. You need to do this in Durham. Making me feel kind of selfish about using the doctor that I trust, who I feel the closest relationship with, who I can most afford. Who has done this for friends of mine, like, it's just, I don't like feeling selfish for trying to preserve my fertility, I guess.
Do you feel guilty? What emotions are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I feel guilty that I feel kind of a mix maybe of guilt and anger that I have to feel guilt. That, like, I'm going to inconvenience other people. Mm-hmm. I think the thing is like, we know so little about fertility that when I tell people this story, they're like, that's fishy. They're like, that's way too much all at once. Like, that you need to go get pregnant right now? That you need to freeze your eggs 3 times? Like, that in your 30? It's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And maybe I would be shocked by this if I didn't have like 6 other friends in their 30s who are in similar spots. But no one knows until it's too late often.
Yeah. When you hear that doubt, what does it make you feel?
Anger. Mm-hmm. Like,
Yeah.
it sucks that I'm happy to, like, I hate the word educate. I think it's so gross. So, but I'm happy to educate in whatever, limited way I can. But I don't like having to do that from a place of them doubting me.
Yeah.
Or judging me for doing something proactive. Like, the other thing that's kind of pissing me off is people being like, why are you doing this? You're so young. And it's like, fuck, like, I wish I were doing this because I was so young. That's why I was originally doing that.
Yeah.
Because then I wouldn't be fucked right now in this position. Like, if I had done this when I was 25, when everyone's like, that's so stupid. Why would you spend the money? Why would you, like, why would you put your body through that? Like, are you that anxious? Like, I wouldn't be in this position. I would only have to do it once, not 3 times.
Yeah, I think it's the painful thing of that people want to root for us and be like, wait, and they insert disbelief. Wait, you're so young, so healthy. This doesn't make sense, and maybe and giving advice and things like that. But for us, it's like, this is the reality that we have now, right? And our worlds change because a doctor told us this, and it I don't know how you felt, but I felt so a mixture of like, I don't know how much this is my fault. I don't know how much this is in my control. I don't know I felt helpless, I felt completely helpless over something that I thought I had control over. So it's that relationship with your doctor and that putting your trust in someone felt really, really relieving. And then to have to defend, this whole situation. Yeah. I remember your mind is just trying to wrap your head around it. And then you have to deal with other people's mind trying to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah. I don't want to be a fucking victim, like, and I know, like, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, work shouldn't get in the way, or how dare anybody at work question this or anything like that. But that's the thing, like, when I first went into this, it was so that I could put work first, in a sense, and like put this off. And now I don't have that option. And so it's like, I need to not feel guilty about that, because I don't have any other choice. I need to feel like I'm not inconveniencing other people, and I don't know if that's realistic. Like, ultimately I am. Like, yeah,
it's a complete flip of what we've been learning, in terms of feminism and taking control of our lives. Like, we spent so much of our time being on birth control, being careful about that, planning our career, working on that early on in our lives, and then saying we could have our family later. But then you get the news that, this is a very time limited thing, right? To be able to have these babies, and we don't even know if we're going to get this shot. And now it's like, wait a minute, I didn't know that this I might not have. My career I could build for the rest of my life. And now, I know there's no right answer, right? It's not like, oh, I should have had babies earlier, but it changes the conversation. The kind of go-to of what we thought was the right thing to do for women is to, work on a career first and then have children later. It's like, well, here we are. I don't know the answer. I don't know if we plan things differently, would it turn out differently?
Yeah. I'm the last person to like talk about sexism or believe that that's the cause or anything. But it does feel like you just get fucked if you're a woman in these scenarios where it's like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, I'm sorry you have to cover my patients, or I'm sorry I can't see them, or I'm sorry, like, and no one's been an asshole to me. These are partly like imaginary conversations, or just like what I'm anticipating, and then from some comments. But it's like, I don't know how, it's like, there's no way to not inconvenience other people. There's no way to not put myself first. And I just like, and I think with people knowing so little about egg freezing, it feels superfluous to them, or like a luxury, or an option. And I'm like, I was told that if I want more than one kid, like, even maybe that one, it's got to be IVF.
Tell us a little bit about now you're going through the egg freezing right now, right? You're doing your shots. Can you tell us a little, for the people who are probably thinking about egg freezing or thinking about this option, what do you do? What are you doing right now? And I could kind of weigh in with my experience as well.
Yeah, you're going to be better at this, honestly. I mean, because I just started. So I came here, and then on Saturday, I got that ultrasound, and then that helped her develop a plan for me because she saw what we're working with. Mm-hmm. And so then she was able to put me on the proper medications. And now, basically, I take 2 pills of Femara every night. And Caroline gives me a shot in my stomach of a cocktail of hormones that Dr. Amy mixes. And I say that because some other people, I apparently have to mix their own meds. Yeah. So, and when Amy, what's really nice is that, like, I'm here 5 minutes away from both her house and the clinic. And so she gave me a calendar so I kind of know what to expect. It's like more ultrasounds, making sure everything's okay, seeing if the follicles are growing. And sometimes you can get some more follicles, but it's not to be expected from the stimulating hormones. So I'm hoping, but she told me not to hope for this, so I'm not allowed to hope for. I guess I can hope, but not expect that I'll have more than 6 follicles in 10 days. So they need to grow, so that, we can extract the eggs, I guess. And so I shoot myself with hormones every day. And it's not bad. No one likes getting shots, but it's like such a drop in the bucket. And then, Kibby, why don't you take over? Because you know more about the rest of it. I'm on day 3.
Sure. I mean, to speak to the cost, it is very costly, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes if we just do private egg freezing. There are many private clinics that do it, but also major hospitals and reproductive centers. A lot of mine was covered, not all, mine was covered by my health insurance. So because I got the diagnosis of infertility, meaning that I've been trying for, my husband and I were trying for 7 months and we were not successful. And so with that diagnosis, we were able to get a lot of the egg freezing IVF covered. And so when I say egg freezing versus IVF, in vitro fertilization, it's basically the same procedure as egg freezing. But then they just mix the sperm when you take the eggs out. That's the difference between IVF and egg freezing. So do you know if insurance covers egg freezing if you get a diagnosis of infertility, or only IVF? It depends. And this is for everyone. It depends on your health insurance, and you just got to look at the benefits. I specifically, knowing my diagnosis of infertility, I looked for health insurance plan that covered as much as possible. So it did cover it for me. So what egg freezing is like, what it was for me, is that it's based on your cycle. So figuring out when your period starts and kind of, and then around that time I did estrogen patches to kind of thicken up my uterus. And then about 2 weeks of shots. So that's the bulk of the egg freezing time, is 2 weeks of everyday shots. I did 2 shots a day, and then eventually added 3. So you do shoot 2 shots that basically make your eggs become eggs, right? You basically become like a big house of bunch of grapes, right? You're like growing these eggs, and then you start to take another medication that stops you from just ovulating a bunch of eggs at the same time. So you basically like let them grow. And that period of shots is anywhere between 8 and 14 days for me. Mm-hmm. And around like day 11 and day 12 for me, I went in and you get a retrieval. So those 8 to 14 days are unpleasant. You're doing shots every day at the same time. You're filled with hormones, so you feel really bloated and you're growing. It basically, I heard that you feel like you're getting pregnant, 3 months pregnant within like 2 weeks. So I definitely felt like I had a new organ inside me. For me, the hormones themselves did not affect my mood that much. I know that I was very, very tired, but I know that it's different for every person, but I felt generally okay. It was during the pandemic, so I was not feeling great anyway. But then I got the retrieval, which means you go for a really quick outpatient procedure. You go under and they take a little needle, go in there and suck out the eggs. And they figure out how many are mature, and the mature ones they can freeze. The only difference between that and IVF is at that stage. If you're doing IVF, they just take the sperm and mix it in and fertilize those eggs right away, and then freeze them if you need to. Yeah. With egg freezing, they just freeze the eggs. Yeah.
And I guess, so I'm probably going to do 2 rounds of egg freezing and then 1 round of IVF. And that's because mixing Paul in there makes them easier to freeze, and then less, I guess, maybe not easier to freeze, but they're less likely to thaw out poorly. So, right? Like, it's safer to thaw embryos.
Technology, and this is the cool thing. I've recently since I've been doing egg freezing, been so open about it, I've been talking to people who, there are new startups and new movements of trying to make this easier and more available. So I don't know, in the next few years, we might have booms of technology where this can be easier. But so far, actually freezing embryos is more effective than freezing eggs, because eggs are just sacs of water and embryos are cells. So you just have a higher chance of a live birth with embryos. But again, a lot of these factors are, like how genetically, how are the quality of eggs, right? If you don't have a lot of good quality eggs, they're harder to freeze, obviously, so there's all these different things. I just remember one of the hardest parts is like every step of getting news and going to the doctor. It's just like, you have to digest new information each time, right? Like, you go in one appointment and everything's fine. You go into another appointment, they discover something, or you're waiting to hear how the egg quality is, how many you have. So I felt like it was all consuming. I was still going to work. This process I described, I was waking up at 6, I was going to the doctor, and then doing all of this stuff, getting news, getting blood drawn, ultrasounds, coming home, 9 a.m. I started with my patients.
Jesus.
Right? So it's just, that's all I can think about. You're waiting for the call from the doctor all day, so I'm trying to do therapy and waiting for a phone call to hear how many eggs I'm going to have. So I really hope that with more awareness about this, and this is kind of why we're doing this, the more awareness of this, maybe some compassion of, not only do women need a little bit more support for being able to have a career and babies, but all the things involved, right? I had to do we have to do full-time work with this going on. And, the men don't have to. I think that's something, we could transition to talking a little bit more about the mental health implications and how it affects relationships. But I've talked to a lot of women too that have eventually this, I don't hear this from you yet, but this, hopefully not ever, but this feeling of unfairness because we have to, the women have to deal with this, right? The men are not going to get an ultrasound and blood drawn every day. Like, we have to worry about, and naturally we take on the emotional burden of it. Like, what's wrong with me? I thought I was fertile and a fertile woman, and now I'm something else, right? And which, that's a distortion. That's something that, our minds kind of play, like, am I womanly or not? But we take on a lot of the shame and guilt of fertility and the burden, both physical, sometimes financial, and emotional. So sometimes it could be a big divide between you and either your partners or other people that you're working with that may not be having to go through this.
I just feel like it's hard not to be in denial, because, and I don't mean that I literally don't believe what's going on. I do. And that's why I think the word denial doesn't feel quite right, but it's that it doesn't feel like it totally lands, because 2 days ago, I thought I was going to get married in 2 summers, and then I would try to get pregnant. It's very weird to go from that to gotta catch all your eggs, and then rip out your birth control and go. Yeah. Don't get married. You can, but like courthouse or whatever. Like, better hope that this is the guy. And like, thank God, yes. But like, you know what I mean? It changes the relationship dynamic. Like Paul and I called, I was like, you got to stop smoking. We got to drink less. We got to, like, we don't have a big enough house for this shit. Like, I guess we could do it with one baby, but we just got exercise equipment for the extra room, you know? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's like, it just doesn't make any, it's just so fast. And it's really hard for my mind to adjust to that in time, I guess. And then, and is that, I think that's why it just sucks to think about the logistics with work, with getting out here, with answering other people's questions, even though when I say that, please ask me questions. It matters more to me that you get the information you need than that some people have asked me questions that irritate me. And also, I'm on hormones and I'm going to be irritated and pissed off and sad anyway. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. But it's just like the thing also that's keeping me from a little bit of the unfairness angle, even though it's probably not clear from this podcast because I sound angry, is I know that you went through this and that our friends have gone through this and that Caroline's going through this. It's just like, I don't have to feel like something's wrong with... The thing that feels wrong with me is being 30. Like, I can't... Why does... Like... Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had me at 40, you know, in my mind, 30s were safe. And now it feels like everyone I know in their 30s is struggling to get pregnant. Or, you know, they found out that their egg numbers are low or that they have something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the more reason why we're doing this podcast right now is that there are more and more people struggling with this. Yes, ever since I've been going through it, I've hearing more and more people dealing with this. And you know what, to be honest, in other times when we don't have this technology and this advances in medicine, people probably just kept trying until that one of your 6, you know, had, you know, popped out a baby. And even if it was low likelihood, people still can get pregnant without this. So, but it adds a level of, I felt like trauma of finding out there's something's wrong, that it might have been there the whole time. And then, yes, the logistics and how to make this work and how to make this work in a really demanding job that we're in, demanding field, partner questions. These are all things that my mind just spun around. For 2 years, 2 straight years is all I thought about in the back of my mind. I would be having conversations at parties and whatever, and I just kept thinking about it. I was like, oh, how many glasses of wine did I drink? Am I supposed to drink too little or too late? Well, it doesn't matter. Maybe it was because I drank too much in college, and that's what, you know, like over and over. And it's such a lonely experience because then I started over time just feeling so distant from my friends who have children. I was so excited to see them, and there was a part of me that wanted almost to be like more of like a parent figure for these kids, you know, more of the auntie figure and like auntie. But then there was another part that was like painful of like, what's wrong with me? And I felt so far away. I still feel so far away from them. So yeah, it's you know, this is us being honest about how hard this is, and to not take this for granted.
No, I think I just want to be in a little cocoon of thinking about being hopeful about babies and like preparing with Paul and just talking to Caroline and just being in my hotel room. And I think I get frustrated and sad when real life starts eking in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because that's when it starts feeling unmanageable. Or like it's not very sacred, like it's a burden or... I don't know. Yeah. I mean, to speak to, you know, the research is showing a little bit about what we're talking about on a very personal level. I just read a paper that shows that women who struggle with, women specifically, this is not necessarily for men, but women specifically who struggle with infertility have more risk for anxiety disorders and dysthymia, kind of this low level of depression. Well, you know what's fucked up too? Then I read that Lexapro, the medication I'm on, can contribute to infertility. And the result, and that's a scientific paper. This wasn't like random, you know, Googling WebMD. It was like, well, we've concluded that anxiety contributes more to infertility, so women who are on Lexapro should stay on Lexapro. Because anxiety is even worse. So it's like, okay, damned if you do.
Yeah, what do you do, right? I mean, there's, you know, this is the tough part about research too, that there's... research in infertility is like relatively new in the past couple of decades, so you get some information about like how coffee can, you know, caffeine can affect it, and some that it's okay. So Yeah, it's a lot of information that we're trying to balance. And I think, what I want to get across today too is the emotional piece. I was intentionally asking you how you felt because there's so much planning and plans and practicality and how do you have a baby? How do you take time off? How do but there's also the emotional piece that I blew past because I was like, okay, I got this news that I'm infertile. What do I have to do next? What's my next doctor's appointment? And then I would have moments where it would all come crashing down. So I think for me, my infertility struggles is easy to try to suppress emotion and keep going. But I was just reading a paper actually by Peterson. It was published in 2012. We'll link it on the website. But it's really nice. It's called An Introduction to Infertility Counseling, a guide for mental health and medical professionals. And it lists out a bunch of different topics and issues in fertility for providers to look out for. And some of the things they talk about is just really simple things that we've talked about before, where there might, in this space, there's a lot of problem solving and advice giving, especially from male partners, like, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, and kind of distancing from the emotional piece. But every news that we get is a loss, right? Yeah. Every news we get that we have a period of grieving, wanting to be in that bubble of like planning kids like how we normally would, but then having to cope with like a doctor telling you something else. It's painful, and there's a lot of sadness, a lot of anger that I think the times where I was healthiest, I would balance between like, what do I do next? But also, what am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel like that for me, everything has been coming in waves. Yesterday, I was in a fabulous mood all day long. Probably because I was just hanging out with Caroline all day long. And she has such a sense of humor about it at this point, because she's been dealing with this for a year and a half. But then when I get alone, it's a little riskier, because what if I start Googling, and oh God, every time I read these things about egg freezing, it's all these women who are in their late 30s and they're like, so, what we're trying to get is like, we're using the stimulating hormones to get up to like 15 follicles. And I'm like, cool.
Right. It's hard.
30 with 6.
Yeah, it's hard to not get caught up in the comparison when you Google. But I think what you're saying is a really good point, that now more than ever, feeling connection and seeking support is, and because as I said, it feels really lonely a lot of the time, and because I felt a lot of like good well-meaning, but some pity from women who were like, oh, my fertility's fine, but you're going through IVF. That must be so hard. And I felt like an alien, and I felt, like something's wrong with me, like an outsider. And so talking to other people who've also struggled with this, even just like talking about it in general, that people listening, if there's a support group out there, even through Zoom or something like that, go look for that, because that could really make the difference between really descending into your own anxieties and like WebMDing what endometriosis is and what my like chances are to having a baby, and then feeling like there's hope, right? The moments I talked about it with people who are going through something similar, or who went through something similar and had a baby through IVF or something else, I felt more hope.
I feel kind of bad for my friends right now, because I don't know how they should talk to me. The kind of, sometimes the pulling for emotion is okay, but only if I'm emotional. Otherwise, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I don't need. And then other times, it's like not something I want blown past necessarily, but I kind of doing this weird thing where like I'm fine, but then if somebody says the wrong thing, I'm like in another emotional swing, and then I'm pissed or sad or like, and so I told Paul, like, please just forgive me for the next 2 weeks. And his dad's a pastor, and he's like, I've seen couples with this. Paul, you got to be on your best behavior.
Yeah. I remember that when, everything that people would say, my friends and my loved ones, and even if they meant well, especially if at the time when I was trying and I wasn't sure what was going on, a lot of people gave advice based on what worked for them. You know, like, oh, just be in love. Just have a glass of wine, maybe a joint, and relax and be together, and it'll happen. It will happen someday. And I remember just being enraged because I was like, you don't understand that just that worked for you. You don't have this condition.
Yeah.
And I do remember my husband at some point, I was just in the pits of it, and he said, it seems like nothing that people are saying to you is helping. It seems like you're upset at everyone that someone said. And I felt really guilty when I heard that, but it just made me realize how depressed I was getting, and how, you know, how I was like withdrawing from people and shutting people off. And I don't know what advice would be the best. I mean, of course, like just getting emotional validation from people was probably the best. And
it always works.
And talking to other people who had infertility issues made me feel less alone. But other than that, just like people, you know, loving me and supporting me through the process and really celebrating with me, even just like small wins.
Right.
Like, you have 6 follicles. That's great. Some people don't have any. And, you know, like stuff like that. I don't know. But, you know, as we go along, you could see what is helpful for what people say to you versus not.
Yeah, I feel like what's been unhelpful is an easier conversation. It's like, don't erode my trust in my doctor. Don't Google diagnose me or try to figure this out. Like, I'm going to say things that are probably inaccurate, or I'm going to be confused. And like, that doesn't mean that my doctor is wrong, or that my plan is wrong, or that I need to be doing something else. It means I'm not a fertility doctor and I don't know what the fuck is going on with my body.
Yeah.
I don't know. Giving me a break.
What would a break look like? What would that look like if someone gave you a break?
I just don't want any conflict right now. Like, not that there's been any conflict, but just like, I think I'm in a little bit of a self-righteous place where I'm not picking fights with people, but if somebody were to like ask me for something, I'd be like, fuck you, it's my time to be sad. Like, just like, maybe unfair, but
no, I think what you're saying is like, I need space for me to feel and deal with this on my own terms and support me through it. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that's very fair.
You know, I think if your friend is going through this, just do something nice for them. I honestly, everyone's different. Okay, so some people are going to want to blow past this, go back to business as usual. So I guess ask them what they need. But the day after this happened, I walked into Caroline's hotel room. She's like, Paul is adorable. He's restoring my faith in men. And I was like, what? When did you talk to Paul? And what's going on? She's like, he's just doing something really cute for you. And that sounds like Paul, and I believe her. And now I'm kind of like, thank you. He is not always good at the emotional validation piece, but he's good at treating me like I'm worth gold. And it means a lot that he's just putting his efforts. Now I guess the standards are kind of high, Paul, so I hope it really is as cute as she said it was. But he's pouring his efforts into just doing something nice for me and taking care of me and like...
Yeah.
It's not pitying, you know, he's excited. Like, that's where his head is. He's like, can't wait for a baby. If we get one, I don't know. Yeah. And he was like, this was cute too, because I already knew this, but he's like, so apparently, like, women can feel, you know, like they failed their partner or something, or they're not good enough, or their partner's gonna be disappointed, and you know you don't have to worry about that, right? Which was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, like, he's just being there and giving you love, right? He's not jumping in with all these different, you know, you should do this, you should do that. He's just like giving you love, supporting you and respecting you and not blaming you or making you feel like lesser than because of, you know, and whatever's going on.
He got the cats to use the litter box, which was really important to me.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's like, no more fucking scooping. Sorry about all the F-bombs today. But don't be mad at me. It's my turn to be sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh.
Does the literature say anything else? Sorry. Fold it back to me.
I mean, I think what we're seeing here is that there's a grief infertility, right? I think that's easy to, and that it's going to go through all sorts of waves. Some you're going to celebrate some good news. You're going to be angry. You're going to be sad. You're going to be confused. You're going to feel lost and alone. Small acts of kindness is going to feel amazing. Small, misguided, yet well-intentioned comments from friends and loved ones are going to feel like a dagger to your heart. It's going to be a process, and you're just at the start of it, and it gets better. It does get better. There's a lot of empowerment to what we're doing and figuring this out and taking control of it and seeking support, getting the word out, making this not a stigma thing. There's a lot of meaning that could, and when you become a mother, and I'm saying this, like, we don't know how we're going to become mothers, right? We said this in the last episode. It could be adoption. It could be this, IVF. It could be, a happy accident. But when you become a mother, you're going to take a lot of these skills of like how to get support, how to grieve, how to feel, but also plan, and turn that into more strength as a mother. So
on the PSA part, I'd have to say there's a very easy, not necessarily solution, but like there are preventative measures you can take. And what pisses me off is that most women out there want to be moms, and we have no idea how to do it other than to have sex and pray. And it blows my mind that we get pap smears yearly, but we don't do ultrasounds. Why did I not know that I have endometriosis until it is so severe that it knocked out an ovary? Why? All she did was stick a wand up me and twist it and look and be like, there's no eggs there. That's not hard. So like, this is Dr. Amy's advice. She's like, if you do a birth control switch over, ask for an ultrasound. Ask for your levels. Like, every few years. Be
proactive about investigating these things. Yeah.
Get modern fertility. So many of my friends, I think it's because they just, modern fertility costs $100. And my modern fertility levels were false. But I want to be clear, this was not modern fertility's fault. My ovaries lied to them. It's like modern fertility can't do anything if your ovaries are lying to them.
Right. But it's a good screening tool. It's a good way to get the process started and then follow up with a doctor. So
yeah, it costs like $140 or something, and a lot of my friends aren't doing it because I think a mixture of $140 is like just enough for them to not want to like prick their finger and just find out when they're probably fine. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. They're not ready for a baby. Yeah. And then like maybe not wanting to know if there's a problem. Yeah. But just like do it. Just get your levels checked and then get an ultrasound. And then you'll have a plan and you won't be in my position or Caroline's position.
Also, I want to give you a heads up. I don't know if this is going to affect you, but this is, I read this in the research and I experienced this, so I thought I'd, share this now. But don't be surprised if there's like this hidden panic, this fears of I gotta get babies now that might affect the way you interact with your partner and in different ways. Like Caroline was talking about this, whether, feeling like she had to stay with someone who was not right for her, or feeling like, or reevaluating your partner, or making a lot of choices based on fears where that might not be wise, right? To kind of try to solve things really quickly. So just notice that there's this new panic there, new fears, not unfounded, right? It's based on reality, but it might drive a lot of your decision making. And I just was reading about this in that paper, Peterson paper, that with couples, sex gets affected. Your sex life with your partner, it's no longer this fun, spontaneous. Right. It becomes something that's very more functional. Sometimes it could be really lovely because it could be very meaningful and you're coming together for its very direct purpose. But it also could be very strained, right? It could make it very routine, forced. You have to have sex during a certain time, and that could feel really,
like your partner.
Yeah. There's a lot of emotions involved with that. So, it could create a more emotional distance because you're doing business and not necessarily connecting as a partner. And it's hard to kind of get in that mode, especially when you're having sex and this is all you're thinking about. It's like babies, babies, babies. So this paper recommended it, and I found this very helpful, but talking to a therapist about that and talking to your partner about that openly and finding ways to make it less, a job and more about you like sharing love together and, planning a beautiful family together. So I don't have a lot of like good answers for that, but just to keep that in your mind that that's something that happens and that is totally normal.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, how could it not be? Like suddenly it's a job. You gotta do
suddenly
it.
It's like, you've got to, we have to have sex tonight, even though we're in a fight or something happened or I'm bloated because I had too much cheese on the pizza, like,
and
it's the thing.
I think that would be especially hard. Like, okay, I'm almost kind of excited for that part of my sex life because suddenly I'm going to view, like sex, like it goes through stages, and sometimes in the beginning it's amazing. And then sometimes it's just more like, I don't know, it gets more routine anyway. And now it's like, I get to dream about this baby every time. And so I'm almost excited for that. But part of me is like, am I going too fast? Like I'm already going to marry this guy. So great. But part of me is, it's like knowing that now I had to get pregnant immediately. It's almost like my rational side of the brain is going, wait, make sure this is a rational decision instead of an emotional decision. Exactly. And then in a weird way that makes me doubt it.
Balance both. Know that there's a fear there and you're feeling the ticking time clock, but also take time to think about it and talk to your partner and talk to Paul about it, right? I think that was the mistake I made, is just like, okay, panic. This has to happen, instead of thinking, okay, take a breath. What would I choose and what would I do if I had more time, right?
Well, and I can imagine for some women, like part of me is almost excited to get the green light on going ahead now, because I've got this fucking plant obsession. I'm buying like 20 fruit trees, and part of me is like, I think maybe that's my body wanting a baby. Like I think maybe part of that. Yeah. But for other women, it's like, maybe you really didn't want a baby right now, and now's the only time. And so having sex to make this baby that doesn't feel like the right time just really doesn't feel good. Yeah. There's all this doubt and anger and unfairness and like confusion involved. And so
this will be a process. We'll go through it together. If for people who are listening, who either experience this or have loved ones who experience this, please reach out to us. I think that the biggest thing that's helped is connecting to others struggling with the same thing. So reach out to Jacqueline through her Instagram.
Yeah, please reach out. I'm not going to have much advice other than please go get an ultrasound and like get your levels checked. But what is helping me is knowing I'm not alone in this. It's not unusual for this to be happening. Well, it's kind of unusual, but it doesn't feel that unusual with everyone around me to keep me company. And so I think we need to talk about it more. We need to be more open about it. It needs to be less of a shameful secret, because it's not shameful. And if I can be some small part in that, then I'm happy to be. So reach out to Jacqueline at Trombolina. Or you go to our website. There's a place where you could contact us. It sends an email to us, so you could reach out through there. And just we're not medical doctors. We're not your provider, of course, but we'd love to hear from other people who might be struggling with this in terms of just like feeling support and connection and sharing the same in return. So yeah. All right. Thank you guys. I know this was a different type of episode, and thanks for bearing with me. Okay. Bye. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.